Kat is a trade union activist and a co-founder of the Radical Independence Campaign. Kat became active in politics during the anti-war movement against the invasion of Iraq, as did many of the founding members of the Radical Independence movement. She currently works with the trade union movement, specialising in organising workers to encourage them to take collective action. She's the chair of the Coalition of Resistance in Scotland, a member of the United Union, and sits on the board of the Scottish Left Review. And our spare time, she's excited to come and speak to us at the meeting, so I'll hand over to Kat. Thank you.
Thanks very much to the organisers for inviting me to speak today. I've been involved in the Radical Independence Campaign, as Gail said. And what the Radical Independence Campaign is, it's a broad coalition of pro-independence activists, some people who are involved in political parties, some people like myself who are in no major political party, and some people who've never voted before in their life. And the reason we set it up is we wanted a vehicle where we could go out and convince as many people as possible that a yes vote wasn't just about Scotland, but it was a vote that could radically transform their lives as well. And when I've been speaking at meetings recently, I've been saying openly that I'm a socialist. And the reason that I'm saying that is because I was recently outed as a socialist, as if it was shameful, by a Labour Party MP in Cairn at a debate in East Kilbride, and that tells you something about the direction of the Labour Party. But for me, the independence debate isn't a debate that's defined by nations or political parties, but about a desire for change. It's a debate that's not about the nation and the flag, but about people's lives and about people's futures. And actually, another meeting that I did in Edinburgh, I got speaking, it was a debate again, I got speaking to one of the no side people afterwards, and he said to me, when we were chatting afterwards, kind of keeping it friendly, I suppose, he said to me, do you know what, I can't wait for all this to be over. And I just thought, that's the most impressive thing I've ever heard, because what an incredible privilege it is to be able to go out and say to someone, what kind of country do you want to live in? What kind of country do you want to see? And sometimes when I'm doing all the and speaking to people about the referendum, there's so much activity, there's leaflet in the stalls, and there's people in this room who are doing all that stuff every single day. I always try and focus myself on one single question when I'm like that, doing all that other stuff. And it's not the question that's on the ballot paper. It's not, should Scotland be an independent country? Because I've already made up my mind about that one. It's not that question. The central question in this debate, when I'm talking to people who are undecided or who know, the question for me is, what outcome in the referendum will best further the interests of ordinary people in Scotland and beyond? That's the key question for me. In the independence debate, I think it's an opportunity to realise that on the 18th of September, we've got a chance. We've got a chance. The 18th of September opens up a tiny gap in a system that has created misery and despair for so many people. And I think a yes vote wedges open that gap even further, and it will give renewed voice to people on this panel who have different ideas about how to run the economy, who want an alternative to austerity, that are anti-war. People who want to see a country run in the interests of millions, the millions of people, and not a few millionaires. So I didn't get involved I actually didn't get involved in politics, as Gail said, because of the referendum. And I always said, I got involved in politics during the anti-war movement, but actually my political education began much longer ago than that. And it was in 1997, and of course I didn't realise it at the time. I was 11 years old in 1997, and I vividly remember when New Labour won that general election. I remember my dad waking me up in the morning and saying, oh, we won, the good guys won, this is brilliant, this is when you're going to see change. And they were so full of hope and expectation, and so quickly, when Blair's New Labour settled into Westminster, that government came to represent something very, very different for a lot of people. And that is when I really got involved in politics. It was 11 years ago, when we saw the skies of Baghdad lighting up orange with bombs, when we saw young people sent off to die in an illegal war. And when we turn on the telly today, and when you look at the papers now, you can see that legacy and what it's done to that entire nation. And it was during that time a lot of us became internationalists and fought for independence. And that gap that I was talking about, that wee gap that opens up for me, that's a chance for an independent Scotland to shape the world stage, but as a nation that stands for peace and a more peaceful world rather than for war. And today we've got another government, 11 years on we've got another government, and it's a government that's still intent on waging a war. And the war that government is waging is against ordinary people. And we're told, I get told this sometimes by new voters, that because I'm voting yes, I'm breaking up Britain. I say to them, but Britain's already broken. That video that we saw at the start of the meeting, Britain is one of the most unequal societies in the developed world. That's not misfortune, that's not bad luck. That's about political priorities. The entire economic structure of Britain is failing. The UK economy, has already been outlined, is quite unique in a lot of ways. It's characterised by massive regional inequalities, by chronic low wages topped up by credit or tax credits, by low productivity, by huge debt. And for the last 3 decades, that type of economic model that all the mainstream parties at Westminster are committed to takes the wealth that's created from all over these islands and it pulls it down into one central point, into the city of London. The UK economy is an economy that has, and this is a phrase that Tony Benn used, actually, when he was talking at the time at Thatcher. It's a phrase which is quite a long time ago, particularly in politics. It's a phrase that he used, and it's still true, that the UK economy has an utter contempt for skill. It has a contempt for making things, for being productive. And Thatcher introduced it, Major maintained it, Blair celebrated it, like Louise already said. The scars of deindustrialisation, of workers having their jobs taken from them, having their rights taken from them, still run really deep in communities across the UK. Now, I'm originally from Hamilton. I've lived in Glasgow most of my adult life. I'm originally from Hamilton, and I will never forget standing on top of a hill in a park in Hamilton and watching Ravenscraig come down. I won't forget that, and I think that symbolises a lot of the way that the economy in the UK has been run. With their natural resources, and with a new political terrain, and with the momentum that we've built up around the Yes movement, Scotland's got an incredible opportunity to break from an economy that's run on debt and speculation, where we can have new green industry that's sustainable. But finance capital dominates our economic structure under the Union, and if we vote no, it will continue to do so. No Westminster party has a plan for rebalancing the economy in favour of ordinary people. I don't think you need to be an expert. Sometimes I think the experts get wheeled out quite a lot. I'm not an expert, I'm not a politician, I don't think I've got all the answers. I don't think any of us need to be experts to see what that economic policy has done to our society. Sometimes all you have to do is take a walk around, open your eyes, look about, see what's happening, or ask someone what it feels like to be on a 0-hour contract, what it feels like to have to wait for your employer to send you a text that day to tell you if you're working or not, like you're a product, like you're a commodity, that some days you'll be picked up and allowed to work, and other days you're left on the shelf and told that you're worthless. And I read a story recently, it was about, it used this phrase, the Glasgow effect, and I'd never heard that before. And the Glasgow effect didn't refer to our proud radical history, or the things that Louise was talking about this area. It didn't refer to those things. It referred to this story referred to a particular statistic, and it was Babies born in Glasgow today have potentially the lowest life expectancy in the UK. That's a Victorian tragedy. That's a Victorian tragedy that my gran could never have thought would happen. When you look at the comparison, the Sunday Times rich list and their wealth continues to grow, has trebled since 2008, and average workers' wages have risen less than 1%. We can see exactly what that economic policy has done to people. And if we don't move now, if we don't vote yes now, that path of economic and social failure will continue. And of course, some people say we need to remain together. We're stronger united, we're better together. But united, we've achieved in past decades an unheard of regression in a so-called modern democracy, an unheard of regression in equality and social justice. And someone asked me recently, why are we not better together? Why is change so impossible under the current constitutional arrangement? And there's a very simple reason for it. It's because the British political system, the political system in the UK has failed. It has failed. You hear newspapers talking about the public and what the public think and the general public. So I looked into some of the statistics about what the public think, and it showed that, and these are YouGov posts, you can get them online, it showed that 12 to 1 people in the UK were against the privatisation of the NHS. 70%, nearly 70% were in favour of a public Royal Mail. Nearly 70% back rail renationalisation. Nearly 70% want to see all major energy companies nationalised. But no party represents those views, not now and not in any plausible future. It's the systems of the way that democracy works in the UK that makes that happen. The British electoral system rules out any space for minority voices, for dissenting voices, and it instead pits Labour against the Tories in a never-ending battle for middle-class, Middle England swing votes. That's the failure of British politics. And that's before we even get into the most undemocratic, the most decayed and unelected parts of British democracy. A House of Lords, a monarchy, inherited wealth, where accidents of birth, where you're born and who you're born to, don't just determine your social outcomes, but how much political power you'll have in the future. All calculations in current UK politics rest on those key Middle England, middle class constituencies. And I think it does something else, and I think it's something that we've seen. I've not been involved in politics long enough to have seen it, but people I've spoken to have agreed that it breeds a particular type of politician. Career politicians who openly say, I've heard people openly say stuff like this, there's no point trying to win over the disenfranchised because their votes don't really matter anyway. And I want to give a real life example of that. And that's when, in the Radical Independence campaign, we go out canvassing. We go out just knocking people's doors and asking have you thought about how you're going to vote in the referendum, and just have a chat about it. And it was during one of these canvassing sessions, and it was a man in his 50s, and the conversation's going on, and trying to convince him about the yes vote, and he's kind of swaying towards yes, maybe like a soft yes, I would call. And he said, no one's been to my door or asked me what I thought for over a decade. I think that's shameful. I think that's absolutely shameful. And it reminded me of one of the, sort of my big heroes. Someone I've always kind of looked back to during the referendum campaign. And it's what Jimmy Reid called in the 70s, the feeling of despair and hopelessness that people feel when they've got no say in their own destinies. It's what Jimmy Reid called alienation, and independence for me is a revolt against that type of alienation. The Radical Independence campaign we've put on some big conferences, we've put on 2 big conferences, all run by volunteers and invited speakers from all over the world. And before our last conference in November, there was an article written about us, and we rarely get anything in the media, they're not really interested in what we are doing. But this article said, Radical Independence is the wild card in the referendum. And it said that if we could go out and convince enough young people, enough women, and enough working class people to vote yes, then all bets are off. And see, looking at the Sunday Herald that just came out with that poll inching closer and closer and closer, I'd say keep your money in your pockets, because right now all bets are off. And in September, for once, I think there's real hope. See, when I see things like that, or you meet someone in the street, someone sees your yes badge and they're kind of going, great badge, and you feel that something in the air is changing. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've finally got something to vote for, that austerity at home, or war on the poor at home, and war abroad isn't the best that I can expect. And see that thing I was talking about with my dad and the 97 election and all that, I've been talking to him about it, and like other people have said to me, oh, you know, like I felt like that too, you know, we all felt like that, we thought it was going to be a great change. And I say to my dad, who's undecided, and I asked him, how did you feel when you went to work the next day? How did you feel when you went and bought your paper at the shop? When you spoke to people on the street, how did that feel? Because the truth is, that even for that second, that moment of jubilation, that will never happen at Westminster again. There's no good guys at Westminster left to win. But instead, we've got a greater chance to vote yes and to shape a whole new nation. And I try not to talk too much about the No campaign. Like, I try not to mention it and just focus on what the problems are, that a yes vote can change that, and that we've got the power to put what we want to see on the table. But there's something about the No campaign that really worries me, and it's the fear tactics. It really, really concerns me. I think it's a terrible way to operate, to make people afraid of their own right to self-determination. But being perfectly honest, I do have a fear. I've got a huge fear, and I am afraid that in years to come, people will still be talking about the Glasgow effect, and that babies born in parts of Scotland will have the lowest life expectancies in the UK, and that there'll still be pensioners that have to choose whether they heat their homes or put food on the table, and there'll be generation after generation of young people who feel like they've got no say over their own destiny. I have no fear of an independent Scotland. I'm only afraid of more of the same. And I think we should never let the No campaign talk about, you know, Scotland being too wee, too poor, you can't sustain it. Because as it's been outlined, of course we can sustain it. You've got Nobel Prize winning economists saying that it's possible. You've got the high regions in the No campaign saying, of course it's possible. But I don't think that it's really about that, and I don't think that that's what politics is really about. Because for me, it's not about how rich you are as a nation, but about how you distribute that wealth amongst your citizens. That is the sign of a civilised society, of a modern nation. And I really believe that the people who are voting yes in this room, I really believe that if we go to that ballot box and we vote yes, then afterwards we'll have the power to shape what Scotland looks like. And I know when I went to the ballot box that it doesn't have, my vision of radical independence, tick here for socialism, tick here, I know that that's not there, but I don't care. Because that's the moment that everything becomes real for me. Because it's always been people in Scotland and beyond that fought to put what they wanted on the table. And I guess vote, like I said, opens up that chance. And that's when everything becomes real for me. And I really, truly think that every single person who's voting yes will have the ability to make not just a new nation or another type of Scotland, but most importantly, to make it ours and to make it belong to the people.